Happy chapter 1 of geometry. I'm so glad to see my favorite geometry class in their seats. This is a tough section to start off with a recorded lesson, but that's all right. We're going to make it work. And I promise tomorrow we're going to spend time talking. So let's just get through some terminology. If you haven't realized, at the start of every chapter, every class, every section, every unit, whatever we call it, there's a lot of terms to talk about. Geometry's got a lot of terms anyway, and so we need to make sure that we're all on the same page, we all understand the same vocabulary. So the first thing that we're going to talk about are undefined terms, because the name of section 1.1 in geometry is called points, lines, and planes. And those are all undefined terms. It's really hard to explain what a point, a line, or a plane is without using the word point, line, or plane. So undefined terms, basically we have to explain with examples. If you look at our little diagram, we've got a point on that line. Whoa, my board's really off. Sorry about that. We've got a point on the line. So it's just a random spot, right? We could put a point anywhere. I've got a point F on the back wall, just to keep you on your toes. We use these terms to define the other ones. Point is the most basic of them all. You kind of know what a line is, but how do you define it? And then a plane. So let's talk about those three terms. We're going to talk about these three terms for the whole rest of the year. So again, let's get this terminology under our belts and then we can spend more time with it. So first of all, a point. Let's put a point up here. Let's call it point S for Stauffer. Okay. It's symbolized or named by a dot, and we always name it with a capital letter. That S, if you cannot tell, is a capital S. It's important. It's not a point if you name it with a small letter, so make sure you keep your capitals. If you're one of those people who make smalls for caps and caps for smalls, you got to switch it up. Characteristics. Basically, a point is nothing more than a location in space. Point is the most basic of all of them. A line, we know what a line is. A line is technically a set of all points, but we're going to usually name specific points on that line. So I'll put 2 points on my line. Notice the line's got arrows on both ends because it keeps going forever into infinity and beyond. I'm going to call this line, well, I'm going to name this line. Let's make this a H and a Q. Right, so we know what it looks like. A line is technically the set of all points. So there are 8 billion points on that little orange segment of line that I drew. We're going to just specifically name 2 of them. So a line is named by 2 points or by a small cursive letter. So we would name this line HQ with a little miniature line above the H and Q. You could also name that line QH with a little miniature line above the Q and H. The arrow above the H says it keeps going past the H. The arrow above the Q says that the line keeps going past the Q. If it stopped, we would not have an arrow above it. And last but not least, there's an arrow at each end. And if you are given any 2 points, there is exactly 1 line that goes through it. So that little orange or little green sentence there's exactly 1 line through any 2 points. If you find that you're running out of space in those little boxes that I give you, feel free to write in the margins, draw arrows, make abbreviations for things, whatever makes you happy. Also, I said that we could name this by a small cursive letter. So a lot of times near one of the 2 arrows, let's name this P. Notice it's a small cursive letter. So those of you who do printing or cursive and mix and match it, we're just going to call it either line HQ, line QH, or line P. You don't have to put the line symbol above the small cursive P because we know, since it's a small cursive P, that we are referring to a line. Lots of stuff to keep track of. And finally, my board's very crappy. A plane. A plane is actually the set of all points in 3 dimensions. So this is an interesting one. The way we draw this to represent a plane is a little parallelogram. Make sure everything's connected. We'll typically put 3 points on this plane. Let's call this plane, I'm going to put a point X, a point Y, excuse me, and a point Z. That X, Y, and Z, when I name them, are those small or capital letters? Since X, Y, and Z are all points, those should be capital letters, X, Y, and Z, on my plane. Be careful. That kind of stuff seems picky, but it's actually quite important. Also, on a plane, you'll often see a large, a capital cursive letter, like, say, let's not do M because M looks like a small one. Let's do a B. Make it cursive by putting a couple loops or something on there. So that's a capital B, capital cursive B. Or we've got a point X, Y, and Z, and that's how we name a plane. So we either, well, first of all, it's a slanted, shaded in the book, quadrilateral, 4-sided figure. We don't shade it because otherwise it turned into a sloppy mess. We name it with 3 points or with a capital cursive letter. So we would actually say something like plane X, Y, Z. Those points are X, Y, and Z are still capital because they're still points. Or we would call it plane B. So a capital cursive or 3 points. Kind of important, and we always do use 3 points, so be careful. And last but not least, there's exactly 1 plane through any 3 points. Now here's the thing. Those 3 points, I need to make one extra little thing here. Those 3 points need to be, if you can read my sloppy writing, non-collinear. Non-collinear. I'm sure that your excellent math skill or excellent English skills will aid in your excellent math skills. The root word of non-collinear is line, and it's not a line. So those 3 points, when we pick 3 points, we wouldn't do X, Y, Z, where we could draw a line through it. We do X, Y, and Z, where they more are triangular, and that's what represents that plane. So just be careful when you pick 3 points. They cannot fall on the same line if you're going to name that plane. And we'll talk more about that as we kind of look more at planes and where they come from. So then on the same note, collinear means the points lie on the same line. And you probably remember from 5 seconds ago, non-collinear points are not on the same line. Coplanar, root word, plane, right? So coplanar are points that lie on the same plane. Non-coplanar, not on the same plane. I put points, but we really could put lines or points. So lines are points that either are or are not on the same plane. And a lot of this is kind of spatial thinking. So some people are really good at this and others struggle a little bit more. So we'll do a lot of examples looking at coplanar points, collinear, looking at planes and points and lines. All right. So in this practice, it says use the figure to name each of the following. So I'm looking for a line that contains W. Now that W is what? A point, a line, or a plane? It's a capital letter, right? So that's a point. So a line containing W, here's W on my little diagram. I hope yours is copied okay. We could name that line a whole lot of ways. The important thing is the symbol that goes along with it. Do you notice the small cursive letter on that line that contains W? We could call it line N. Another way to name that, we could name that line VW. But if I use 2 points, what do I need to include symbol-wise? A little miniature line above it. I could name that line WY. I could name that line XV. I could name that line a whole lot of ways and they would all be correct. This makes it tricky for grading. Name a plane containing X. Notice X is still a point, right? Because it's a capital letter. So the plane that contains X, how do you name a plane? I should mark this. So a plane, you name it by either 3 capital letters, which is 3 points, or by a capital cursive letter. Do you see the capital cursive letter for the plane that contains point X? Be plane P, right? Right here, it's got it. That P is not with a point anywhere. They try to keep them pretty close together. And another way to name that, 3 points that are non-collinear. So I could not name this plane VWX because what's wrong with points VW and X? They're all on that same line. They have to be non-collinear. So I could name it instead, find yourself 3 non-collinear points, maybe WXZ. That would be a good way to name that plane. Or XYZ. Or anything. Looks to me, see if you agree, that point Z has to be in any way that we name that plane. Could you, for letter B, name the plane using point T? I'm going to make a little note of this, and I'm going to ask you this. For letter B, can you name the plane using point T? Think about that. I'm going to get that, come back to you. So we can go through, we'll go through these other 2 examples because I do want to make sure that we get to talk about these things. I'm going to highlight. Go ahead and do C and D. I want to see what you come up with for C and D. All right. Intersection. You probably know what an intersection is. Some of you may or may not be driving at this point, which is always a terrifying thought. Intersection is where things cross or touch. If you're talking about driving, it's where roads cross. If we're talking about lines, it's the point at which they cross. If you're talking about planes, if you look at that little diagram on the right, notice my planes are intersecting. They are crossing or touching. There's really a couple important things. Look at lines L and M. Hopefully you spotted lines L and M. I'm going to write this down. When 2 lines intersect at what? A point, a line, or a plane? If you look at the planes, 2 planes intersect at what? A point, a line, or a plane. So my 2 lines are intersecting. Lines L and M intersect at point P, right? So when two lines intersect, they form a point. What about my two planes? Do you see planes A and B? That's about as cursive as they get for their letters in the book, but plane A is the one that's horizontal, plane B is the one that's vertical. When two planes intersect, what is formed? They touch at more than one point, right? Notice right here, whoa, I'm way off. Notice right there, make this work. There we go. Line R is where those two planes intersect. So two planes intersect and form a line. Kind of an important fact. I have to mention space. It's really not. So if we're talking about planes are in 3 dimensions instead of a flat 2 dimensions for points and lines, we need to talk about space. So space is the boundless 3-dimensional set of all points. It can contain lines and planes, and it's defined by the word points. So points, lines, and planes all lie in space. I'm not going to ask you about that. You just need to be aware of we could have a point, a line, or plane anywhere in this classroom, floating midair. All right. So here's some good drawing stuff. It says draw and label a figure for the relationship. This is where that 3D spatial thinking really comes in handy. It says QR intersects a plane T at point S. And please add a miniature line above our QR because that tells us. If it's line QR, what do you know you've got? 2 points, right? Q and R are both points. And Q and R, are they going to be on plane T or are they going to be floating somewhere else out in space? So this is kind of interesting. So what's the biggest figure that we need to start with? That's where I like to start. I'm going to start with the biggest thing. I've got a line. I'll do it this way. I've got a line, I've got a plane, and I've got a point. What's the biggest thing that I need to start by drawing? Biggest thing is going to be a plane, right? So I'm going to draw myself a nice large plane. Doesn't have to be fancy. I'm going to call it plane T. Whoa. I'm going to call it plane T if I can ever get that up there because my board's so crazy today. And I'm going to make that capital T with some swirls so it looks kind of like a T. It's not a J, people. Don't even say it. All right. So now we know what is in or on plane T. Is QR a part of plane T? Notice this word, intersects, right? Intersects means cross or touch. If it just crosses or touches the plane, is it lying on top of it or is it going through it? Think of a piece of paper and you shoot a pencil through it. Don't do it right now. So I'm going to have a QR. I'm going to have it touch right there. Whoa, right there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a dotted line because it goes underneath that plane. Whoops. It goes underneath. I can't see it, but I can see it, if that makes any sense at all. Got to put my line mark on there. So is QR is the line, so that means maybe a Q. Oh my goodness gracious. Maybe a Q is here. I'm struggling. Okay, I got this. There's the rest of my plane. There's the point with a Q. There we go. I'm going to say line R, point R, is down here. And where does point S go? It's where it intersects the plane, right? So this right here has got to be point S. I hope your drawing is neater than mine. All right, so points, lines, and planes, we'll do some drawing, we'll do some talking, and we'll keep practicing and looking at and creating our own planes and things like that. Let's talk about these tomorrow, I think. So I've got a couple questions that I asked you before, a couple examples that I said for you to finish up, and then we'll finish these together. because I do want to talk about this crazy shape that's on top of plane X and all the things that are happening there. And that would be it for section 1-1. Lots of terminology, lots of spatial thinking, lots of crazy things happening. So we'll kind of talk as we go, and then we're going to use these terms a lot. Thanks for listening, and that is the end of section 1-1. Have a great day, geometry.